Just as there was an update for the Phase 0 lesson, I also have an update here for the Phase 1 lesson for the mouth posture course. That's going to help you develop a native accent in American English. Now remember, in the Phase 0 update, we covered that very, very important point of the back tension, which is absolutely required for everything that you do in Phase 1 and in Phase 2. Now with that in mind, let's cover some updates, some extra tips and points, and some useful things that are going to help you succeed in Phase 1 even better, which will also help you moving into Phase 2 that we're going to see next time. The first thing is related to the jaw. It is so super important. I have so many students that I'm working with that as they're trying to get this center of gravity, maybe they're actually doing it really well, they're following my instructions, they're pushing down in the middle, all this stuff, but then their jaw's not open enough, and I say, hey, let's open the jaw a little bit more, and boom, sounds so much better. Even if that back tension is still there, they still end up sounding clearer, better, the sound has more space. So the jaw is a critical core part of American English. You need to get it more open, especially for the center of gravity sound. Phase 1 isn't just about getting the core posture, it also puts everything into place for Phase 2 and everything else that you learn moving on. So do not forget the jaw. When you're opening your jaw, I've had a few students who, remember when we found the jaw opening and I told you to open, until you start feeling that muscle push out and then you pull back a little bit. That's about the proper openness. Apparently there's two ways to open your jaw. One is you can actually hinge from here, in which case you're either not going to feel those muscles or it's going to feel different. And so you want to make sure as you're opening your jaw, if you're going to use that to help find the right height, that you do it the correct way, where you're not trying to sort of pinch it here and open that way, but actually use the muscle to open the jaw. So now that we have this back tension thing and the jaw, remember how I said before in the Phase 1 lesson, jaw plus schwa, okay? Jaw plus schwa, because you need the jaw open to get the schwa sound, the center of gravity schwa sound. Now, because this back thing is so important, that provides the foundation, whether or not your jaw is open or not, all right? We talked about that in the update to Phase 0. So you want back tension, then jaw, then schwa. Those are the three keys that are most important in order to properly produce If the back tension is not in place and the jaw is not in place, you're not going to get a perfect center of gravity sound. And don't forget that that back tension includes not pushing the tongue forward. So you do this and open. So it's sort of like if you're used to this, you're gonna do something sort of like that. We get a lot more space through the entire vocal tract. Then you push down in the middle, all the stuff that I told you before on how to make the center of gravity. But first you got to get everything in place. One thing in particular I want to mention here is the open Spanish sound. Now there's one person that I talked about mouth posture with a little bit early on, and one of his objections to the idea that the jaw is generally more closed in Spanish is that Spanish has this open sound. And I want to clarify that because some people might be a little confused. When we're talking about the jaw height and how it doesn't really move too much, we're talking, number one, through the flow of normal speech, and two, sort of the general height, okay, that's part of the center of gravity, where, yeah, it can open more, it can maybe close a bit, but it's generally going to stay around there. Now, in particular, it won't really tend to close too much in my experience, even from American English. If we do E, we don't really close the jaw that much. But if I fully enunciate maybe the upside down V version of the schwa, or the diphthongs I and ow, even a little bit with O perhaps, fully enunciated, as I've said before, the jaw can open more. So I'm not surprised that if Spanish, for example, has this more open type sound, that the jaw can open more. Now, number one, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be as open as the fully enunciated or in American English, but even if it is, that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that the jaw in Spanish is generally held a bit more closed, and I've already verified this through speaking with actual native speakers of Spanish. So if that was a concern, something that didn't make much sense to you, it is relative, and we're talking about the jaw height that is roughly generally held, not all of the fully enunciated open sounds. But we'll be talking a bit more about that in phase 2 when we start building some of those sounds. I also want to quickly mention the importance of the breath, which is also really easy for even me to forget about. But again, sometimes when a student is making the sound, or even in phase 2, they're trying to make whatever, they don't quite have enough breath. It's like there's something a little bit off, and I say, hey, let's add a little more breath. And it often is something that if it doesn't solve the problem, it does at least make it sound a lot better, a lot clearer. So always keep your eye on the breath as well in this phase so that you can remember that through everything you do. Now, the next thing I want to mention is that I've had a few students who really like to use the mirror to check if they're doing things correctly, whether that's in phase 0, phase 1, phase 2. There's nothing wrong with using the mirror. In fact, I think in one of the jaw exercises, I told you that you can go ahead and use the mirror as a temporary step so you can kind of get used to holding it open. When we're talking about specific sounds, it is still okay to use a mirror as a secondary tool, never as a primary tool. Because remember, what is our goal, right? When you're speaking to somebody, you're not looking in the mirror, looking at your mouth, right, to see if you're doing things properly as you're talking to that person. No. Okay, and that's what your brain is going to develop the trigger for. We're trying to build a feeling, we're trying to build control. You need to visualize it and connect what you hear and what you feel together so that you can actually get the effect without needing a mirror. Depending on what sound you're trying to see, like for example, if you're trying to see, I don't know, the E sound, which is all the way up here, the teeth are probably in the way for that. And if you're trying to look in the mirror, see what your tongue is doing, you're already messing the sound up. Your jaw's out of place, you probably have extra tension. Okay, some sounds like maybe where the jaw is open, it's easier to see, that's not a problem. But even in that case, it's a secondary tool, so don't rely on it. The next point is going to sort of tie phase 0, especially that back tension part of phase 0, into phase 1 so that you really build a strong, solid thing. And it's also going to tie it into your native posture. This is a really powerful thing that some of my students have benefited a lot from. And it's really going to help you sort of switch into English a lot more easily. So what you're going to do, your native posture, however you normally hold your vocal tract at rest, is already an anchor. It's already there, right? And you're just sort of trying to build a new way to hold things. So what you're going to do here, let me just use an example. Your exact native language, and to some extent you as an individual, might be different than this, but the most common thing I find is the tongue's pushed forward, the jaw is more closed, this back area here is held a little higher, a little tighter, and that puts you in a great position for your native language. Now your center of gravity, for example in Spanish, I'm pretty sure the center of gravity is the sound, which again I haven't mastered in isolation yet for various reasons, but it's sort of the Spanish If it's another language, maybe you have it somewhere else. Okay, I'm not saying your language might not even have that sound, but you want to try to find where your language's center of gravity is. Posture is one thing, but then there's going to be a center of gravity, a core key sound that you tend to make when you're thinking. Remember, it's the thinking sound like we talked about before. And yes, there's more than one thinking sound, but it's probably going to be roughly more or less around a particular sound. Like in English, it's And then once you find that, start feeling it, and then make all of these adjustments that we've been talking about to get into that center of gravity in American English. Open the jaw, open up the back area, down in the middle. You want the pressure here with that ball there. So say if you're going from Spanish to English, you'd be like Okay, and I haven't mastered the Spanish posture, so don't kill me for that, but you get the idea. Now if you practice reinforcing that and making sure that it's a good solid center of gravity, that's going to help you get into English a lot faster. It's going to help you build that consistency a lot more easily, and that's going to help transfer into the work that you're going to do in phase 2. If nothing else, it'll make it a lot easier to start practicing or to switch into English mode whenever you need to speak to somebody in English. One other technique that seems like it can be very useful based on my own experience with Spanish and playing with the posture there is that if you are singing, you can try to just generally hold that back posture. And I don't recommend singing for the rest of the mouth posture necessarily for various reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that there's just too many sounds to keep track of in American English. But for this back tension problem and trying to get used to holding it, and then maybe getting used to holding that center of gravity, getting your tongue not push forward, try to do that as you're singing, and that can help reinforce some of the muscles that you need. And we have one final bonus tip for you today, and that is to mimic an American accent in your native language. I might have mentioned this at some point before as well, but I have a little twist on this. Number one, okay, so you're speaking, say you're a Spanish speaker, you're speaking Spanish and you're trying to say, instead of quiero ir a la playa, you say quiero ir a la playa. Doesn't matter if the sounds are right, that's not the point. Just number one, try to mimic an American accent. Now I've worked with one student in particular who actually brought this up, that he says when he tries to, because he tried that technique where he wanted to try to mimic an American in Spanish, and now that he's starting to work on the mouth posture and stuff, he's realizing, oh, this is why I sound kind of American when I do that in Spanish, but it's not the same, okay, because that missing piece is the mouth posture. The little twist here is you can go intentionally use your own posture, but try to mimic an American accent, and then try to use American posture, staying in your language, and mimic the American accent. So for example, if you're a Spanish speaker, let's say that you keep that Spanish posture. You say, I want to go to the beach, which in Spanish is quiero ir a la playa. So you say, with Spanish posture, but trying to sound American, something like quiero ir a la playa, something like that, right? And then you say, okay, let me open the back here, let me open my jaw, let me make sure my is good, down in the middle, okay, sounds pretty good. Now that I'm in this position, I'm going to say the same thing in Spanish because I'm a Spanish speaker in this example, quiero ir a la playa, quiero ir a la playa. And just try to notice, do you sound more open? Do you sound more American now that you're trying to get that posture in your native language, even though you're speaking your native language? Do you think that you sound more like an American speaking your language? This can be a nice little hack and kind of help you bridge, just like that bridging between postures. This is sort of an extension of that little extra exercise that can really help you kind of feel the difference between the postures and start settling in more to that American sound, just staying within your own language, not even trying to say English words. So I would really love to hear you guys' feedback on that last point, but definitely if you have any comments, questions, or if any of these points help you, please let me know in the comments. Phase 2 is up next. When I make the next lesson, it should be coming soon. I know you're waiting. Thank you so much for watching another English Hacks lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.